This is experience number 8 in A New Experience in the Art of Living. The next 3 hours are devoted to the male role and his responsibilities. Here is Professor Howard Watrous.
Tonight you're in for a real treat, because for some of you this will be your first glimpse of a real man. That's a horrible thing to say. It's almost an indictment against manhood, but it is possible in our society to grow up without ever meeting a man today. They are that rare. In fact, when I get through the next 3 hours, you'll understand what I mean. An executive attended this particular night, and he's the West Coast head of this company, a national concern. After going home, believe it or not, he could not sleep at all the entire night. The next morning he had a 2-hour conference with his wife, and when he arrived at work he had a 2-hour conference with the secretarial staff. So you can see that the actual material presented tonight can shake people up, especially if you've never heard it before. We're talking about the most glorious creature on the earth. And it's hard for me to visualize that this creature is the most glorious because I'm this creature and I can't see that it is. To me, there's nothing lovelier than a lady. But the lady, as lovely as she is, was created for man's glory. And man was created for the Creator's glory. He is higher in the chain of command, he is more important, and believe it or not, it's a man's world. There's no way we can get away from it. When it ceases to be a man's world, it becomes a sick world. I've heard several leading authorities, and I agree with every one of them, that one of the reasons that we have lesbian behavior, one of the reasons that we have homosexual behavior, one of the reasons that we have rebellious teenagers is lack of a male role in the family. In other words, there's no proper identification. In other words, there's no one to actually identify that is playing a strong male role. This corrupts everyone in the entire family. Let's look at the wife. I think she suffers probably as much as anyone. She has to actually take over a male role which she's not capable of taking over. Biologically, she wasn't created for such a role. And in the process of doing it, she arrives at 2 serious conditions. Number 1, tension. She has neck problems, back problems, and this is especially predominant at the actual periods that she has every month, her menstruation, her menopause, childbirth, during the 9 months that she carries the baby, 6 weeks after the baby's born. In other words, if she were going to play the role of headship, she should not have to play the role of a mother. And the 2 roles do not agree, and she cannot play both of them. The second thing that happens to her, she becomes frigid. And this ties in with her first problem because this is one of her methods of emotional release, to have an orgasm, and this is denied her because with the tension comes the frigidity which takes away her release. So it becomes like a dog chasing his tail. And then I think the third problem is that man blames her because he's not the boss. So in other words, after she's labored her labor of love to hold everything together, then she carries the blame for stepping in where she wasn't wanted. And then when he sees his manhood shrinking to nothing, he has to point a finger at somebody. So he turns around and points his finger at her. And what has she done? She just tried to hold things together is all. So in other words, then we say that she suffers with the guilt of playing a dual role. Now, let's go back and look at this man that we're going to solve all our problems with, this glorious creature. First of all, let's describe him tonight as a ball of aggression. I want you to visualize this. He has been commissioned to take dominion of the whole earth. Now, would a man with that kind of a commission have to have aggression? In other words, I want you to visualize this person as powerful. Now, it always is nice if he's good looking, if he's tall, if he's dark, if he has a ruddy complexion, and if he has no defects. In other words, if he's not crippled in any way. But it's interesting to know the real man could be paralyzed from the neck down and have his face completely disfigured, and this would not take one iota away from his manhood. In other words, I want you to see the real man that we're describing. He is a man for what he is and not for what he does. Therefore, does he have a good self-image? In other words, if your self-image tonight is based on what you are instead of what you do, is it ever in jeopardy? Never. In other words, he doesn't have to prove anything to anyone. I'd like for you to look at this giant that we're going to describe, and I'd like for you to visualize that his hands are calloused. You say, well, what if he's an office man? It's interesting that real men tend to end up with calloused hands. In other words, they end up with hobbies, they end up with projects. You can't keep them still. A man who's commissioned to take dominion of the world, I'd like for you to visualize that when this calloused hand makes a move, the elements shudder. Can you visualize this type of a dynamic behavior? All right, now would you also visualize that yet this hand that we're talking about that's so calloused is gentle? Now I want to describe tonight what I mean by being gentle. Can you visualize a hand with that much aggression that has it harnessed until it can fondle his own breasts with such gentleness that it brings out every last yearning of womanhood from his wife? Now, by the way, you noticed I said his breasts. And this is going to bring up one of our problems right away. Is he homosexual? No, where are his breasts? On his wife. Because does he own her? In other words, a real man would not tolerate any other type of relationship than outright ownership. In other words, you're not going to satisfy him in any other way. Would you let this same calloused hand caress the rounded curve of the stomach of his wife when it's molded with the joy of new life? Now, I'm describing some intimate scenes, but I want you to visualize this hand with these calluses caressing her stomach when she's pregnant. Now, would you see this same rough hand pick up a little bundle in a pink blanket? And would he be capable of changing the diapers? All right, now contrast this with a man that a lot of people visualize his wife's pregnant and he disappears. We've had so much perversion of this male role that we hardly understand it. In other words, I would like for you tonight to see what we really mean when we're talking about a man. I have a poem that will describe a man to you. It says, an old man traveling a lone highway came at the evening cold and gray to a chasm vast and deep and wide. The old man crossed in the evening dim, for the sullen stream had no fear for him. But he turned when safe on the other side and buildeth a bridge to span the tide. Old man, cried a fellow pilgrim near, you're wasting your time in building here. Your journey will end with the closing day. You never again will pass this way. You have crossed the chasm deep and wide. Why build you this bridge at eventide? The builder lifted his old gray head. Good friend, in the path I have come, he said, there followeth after me today a youth whose feet must pass this way. This stream, which has been as naught to me, to that fair-haired youth may a pitfall be. He too must cross in the twilight dim. Good friend, I'm building this bridge for him. Now there's a feeling in that poem. And this feeling is what I describe as manhood. The man actually is dynamic as we've described him. I would also like to tell you why man is in the condition he is in today. It's expressed this way: I formed men free, and free they must remain till they enthrall themselves. I will not change their natures, nor reverse the high decree. that hath ordained their freedom, they themselves ordained their fall. The fall of man took place because of freedom. The fall of man is still taking place every day for the same reason, only because we are allowed our choice. Now, if a man is to fall, his choice is to run from responsibility. If he is to succeed, his choice is to embrace responsibility. And probably when we talk tonight, you will see that it is all summed up in that one word, responsibility. And really, to me, in this world, it's interesting that something always goes wrong. I mean, this is the pattern of behavior in our world. Something costs too much. I think you should realize that when you're pursuing toward some type of a goal or a target, are there going to be obstacles? In other words, you have flat tires. Something is always going to go wrong in your system and in your plans. You've got the elements, you've got the weather. I could sit here and tell you equipment breakdowns that I've had in the past 4 months that would total over $3,000 in repair bills alone of things that happened without us knowing why or any way to control it. Now, when I am in the head of an organization, such as a home, such as a business, will I be finding myself head-on into these situations day after day? In other words, I can tell you that anyone who's a success tonight financially, has he had setbacks? Hundreds of them. That's the difference between the mice and the men. The men know they're going to have a lot more of them. Now, when we have a chain of command, what makes it function is that somewhere when things get tight, do I have to have something that's going to give? And by the way, if I don't have somewhere in there that I'm going to have some give, what's going to happen to the organization? Well, take a piece of equipment tonight. If you don't have it set up so that when the bind comes, like the cat on a track, when it hits the rock, in other words, if there's not a system set up there for something to give, what's going to happen? It's going to break, all right? Now, what happens in a marriage tonight if you don't have some type of a system set up? When you hit the bump, something's got to give. Now, Junior's not the one that's going to be the spring. Too many families believe this is going to be where the pressure's going to be taken off. I know some men think that the wife's the one. What am I getting ready to tell you? In any organization, the thing that gives, that takes the blunt, so to speak, is the male role. Now, does this guy have to be kind of strong? By the way, every day he's going to get another nut. I mean, there's going to be a constant bombardment on him of things going wrong, things has to be changed, this has to be done, that has to be done. Actually, the night we teach regularity and you set up a beautiful system, are there going to be times when you play the male role when you won't even go to sleep that night? I want you to realize that we're going to have to develop tonight some individuals with character, with strength, that there's nothing on earth can break them. Now, I've done some management consulting with some firms that should be bankrupt tonight. I've got one in my developing subordinates class right now. I have had approximately 12 men from this firm. They are violating enough good principles till they should be bankrupt. They're making good money. In fact, in this particular concern, they're the leading division on the West Coast right now. They just received an award, a merit, for outstanding success. Now, how do I reconcile these two facts? Well, I happen to know in this organization are about 4 giants. And no matter how rough things get, no matter how hard the knocks come, when the knock comes down the chain of command and it hits one of these giants, does his men know there's even been a ripple? Oh, they come to work, they feel secure, there's no confusion, nothing's wrong. They think it's the most wonderful place to work. And I think we're going to study the male role tonight from the definite aspect of being something of a giant that's being able to take everything that comes upon him and just does nothing but smile. And if you ask him, was this a crisis? Par for the course. Are you shook up? No, it happens every day. Now, he also has another ability. He shields those underneath him. In other words, does he come home and tell his wife everything? We're going to go across some principles tonight that maybe you didn't believe in. If you're a weak male, of course you go home and tell her everything. You've got to have somebody to cry on. You look for a shoulder, and who's the shoulder? Your poor, unsuspecting wife. No wonder she has a nervous breakdown. She can't take the load that keeps coming. Well, first of all, when you first walk in, she says, "How was it?" "Wonderful." "How's business going to be going?" "I don't think it could be going any better." She says, "It's wonderful to be married to you." Now, really, what happened that day was 4 major crises. And he's not so sure there'll be a business the next day. In fact, he didn't have enough time this day to solve all the problems, and he's got 3 committee meetings already scheduled for the next morning, 8, 9, and 10. And he'll know by probably 11 whether he'll even have time for lunch. But now, does she know any of this? Now, the children, by the way, in the first situation where he comes home and cries on his wife's shoulder, can you see little Junior in school the next day, and the teacher says, "All right, Johnny, it's time for you," and show and tell. So he describes a crybaby. Can you see the difference? I want you to begin to see tonight, do we need this shock absorber that I'm describing? All right, now, what happens in your home when there isn't one of these around? What effect do the children feel? In other words, what happens to their emotional systems? Well, one thing's for sure, you don't have to worry about growing hothouse plants. But normally, do not these people come out with 2 major damages? Number one, of course, they're neurotic. I mean, this is just the normal thing of living in an unsecured, unstructured environment. But number 2, which is even worse, have they had a pattern to follow? Have they had an example? Now watch this. In other words, there's been no male role, has there? Now, this has real complications, because do they even know who God is? I worked with people, and I wanted to help them and give them some comfort, and I was trying to tell them about their lovely Heavenly Father. And I realized that they would never see God the way I see God. I'm thinking of one lady in particular, and she related her image of God to me, and it strikingly resembled her own father. I couldn't have trusted the image, and here I was trying to get her to trust this image. So we're saying then, those little children who grow up in your home, even their relationship with their Creator is dependent to an extreme degree on the image of that father. In that entire family, those children do not have an image. In other words, there's nothing they can look up to as a real man. Well, we have every type of warped behavior underneath the sun. Now, let me show you how the complication goes. These children then come out into the world to do what? Set up new homes. And will there be a male role in new homes now? No, because none of the children have ever seen a male role. So when he marries this girl, by the way, this girl comes from another home, she doesn't know what a male role is either, so therefore she doesn't even know he's not one. And then the new children of this generation come along, and what chance have they got? By the way, I'm right now to the present generation in America. Now, when the kids finally get out of this particular mess at age 6, when they get a little 8-hour break every day at some school, do they actually know that the lady who stands in front of 30 students has authority? Now, within the last 9 months, I counseled a school teacher. Now, can you visualize a school teacher of first graders crying during lunch hour? Isn't this pathetic? In other words, she was talking to me and she says, "What can I do?" She says, "I have given everything I've got." She says, "But they don't respect me." She says, "I've demanded it. I've done everything." She says, "You tell me how to get their respect." Why didn't they respect her? They don't even know what authority is. Now, can the school or the church or any other institution of society fulfill what has been missing in the home? All right, now there are people who believe that the responsibilities that are not assumed by the parents can be taken over by society. Well, society does not take over the responsibilities, they just lock you up. Now, I don't want to go into this too much, but the process of locking you up only exaggerates your problem, because the place tonight where we train criminals is our penitentiaries. I could go on showing you the problems that come out of not having a male role. What I want to do tonight is tell you about this man. Now, if you should be a man here tonight because of just the fact that you happen to carry that kind of sex, and you find out another hour you're not a man, never have been, don't become discouraged and walk out of here and say, I'm going to run. Because one of the things I'm going to tell you tonight is that when you're a man, you assume responsibility, and the least effort of assuming responsibility is to run. Now let's take an actual illustration. If I were captain of a ship and I had made a big mess of things, I had got the thing into a storm, and let's assume I had done everything wrong. No, I just wasn't thinking, and the ship's going to sink. Now, use the illustration I'm giving you with a ship as a marriage. So the captain finally says, I know what I'm going to do. Before things get any worse, I'm going to throw down the life raft, and I'm going to get in it, and I'm going to get so far away from this ship that I don't know what's going to happen. Now, is that responsibility? Now, even though it's his fault that they're going to sink, what's he going to do? After he has put everybody on board ship into the life rafts, where is he still? On board ship. Now, is it dangerous to be the last guy off of a sinking ship? You say, well, can he swim? It doesn't make a bit of difference whether you can swim or not. When that ship goes down, it produces such a vacuum in the water that being able to swim won't help you a bit. In other words, you've got to get even the life rafts far enough away before it goes under. Does he flinch? Watch this. Does he flinch one iota while he's making sure everybody gets out into the life rafts? No, he doesn't run. All right, now tonight what I'd like for you to do, if you find out you're in the situation of a captain that's already messed up the whole thing, what are you going to do? Help her pack. And help her have an orderly escape. I had to add some more words on there because you were so serious you couldn't catch the humor. No, if she tries to leave, you don't let her. And this is one thing we have to learn about a family affair. We all sink and drown together. All right, number one on the male role, the first ingredient you have to have is somewhere along the line from the time you were born, and I would try to do this with my children within the first 2 years. I have them fall in love with themselves. And I'm talking about a real love affair, the whole bit. If a man is going to be worth his salt in any endeavor, the first thing he must do on the face of this earth is fall in love with himself. This is one of the things I try to do with my 2 young boys. I want them to know they're wonderful. I tell them all the time they're wonderful. I want them to feel this. In other words, if a man has actual needs in his life, such as actually feeling that he is nobody and that he has to depend on somebody to build him up. In other words, if his ego strength is weak, if his self-image is weak, then his entire life is spent conniving and maneuvering, trying to prove to somebody who he is. And if you're going to waste your life doing that, you're not going to have time to be a man. In other words, you're going to be fooling around with the trivialities of impressing people. And your actions a lot of times will be for the simple fact that I'm trying to make people think I'm something that I know I'm not. Now this does marvelous things for you. It stops you from seeking fulfillment with everybody else's psychological makeup. Now the average American is trying to do what? Just like a leech, going around looking. What can I get out of him to finish my own makeup? Oh, there's another one. I'll get this and this and this, and then this will make me more complete. How do you feel when one of these leeches is walking around looking you over? They're trying to figure out what? What can I take from his personality to make me complete? Now, if you are complete, do you satisfy yourself? By the way, some of you might not know what I mean, but when the mother's got the nurse's uniform from nurse's training that she didn't finish, she still has the white shoes. The daughter's growing up, and every so often they try on the shoes. And every so often they try on the uniform. Pretty soon the girl gets an idea that she would like to be a librarian. All she has to do to cause a royal battle is to come home and innocently tell her mother, I'm going to go to college and be a librarian. The mother, in so many words, is simply saying, you are not you, you are me. And I don't want to be a librarian, therefore, you're going to be a nurse. Now, have parents force children into occupations? This is what we call fulfillment of yourself in your children. This is neurotic behavior. Now, if you really love yourself, are you already fulfilled in yourself? Then do you exploit everybody around you? Now, if you really, truly love yourself, if you have a dynamic self-image that's complete, then the step 2 is an automatic. It results in the cause of step 1, and step 2 is love of others. We say then a real man loves people. And go back to our affectional field diagram. It's impossible to have a real man below the x-axis. We say that a real man has been able to separate people from things. And this is fascinating because we started out by describing this ball of aggression, this dynamic being, as somebody who could fight, somebody who could conquer. Yet, does he fight people? No. This is a fascinating part of it. He is able to know that this is material, this is animal, this is the weather, and he's able to tie into it with every bit of strength he's got, and he's also able to say, this is a human being, and handle that human being with kid gloves. Soft, gentle, tender, and loving. In other words, he has to be able to tell the difference. Therefore, if he's in the positive aura, he has not dehumanized anybody. And remember, from our affectional field diagram, we give you the 7 O's that allow you to dehumanize. Love thy neighbor, how much? As thyself. Now, can you do it anymore? Try it. Now, the average American hates himself. Now, what happens to our law? If you hate yourself, how do you feel toward me? Hatred. I have done a lot of marriage counseling, and this is one of the major problems that I have in marriage counseling is not other women or other men. It's the fact that they love as much as they can love, but is that enough? No, so what we have to do, we have to go right back to each individual and help them fall in love with themselves so that they can turn around and love their partner. By the way, if you can't love yourself and you can't love your partner, what about the children? Well, there's one thing that will make sure that they're fed and clothed, and that's the instinct of parenthood. In other words, that drives you to go ahead and make sure that the neighbors think you're a good parent. But can you actually fulfill your instincts without loving? I want to show you how you can do that. In other words, the actual basic instinct to provide can be done in such a way that it's done to the detriment of the child's emotional well-being. In other words, it's possible for me to love the child so much that I provide even less than what I would like to provide without satisfying an instinct within me for my own self-gratification.